Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. We are in Paris at the MPLS and SDN World Congress 2015 and we're in a cinema. This is a hotel venue and everywhere's full and very, very busy with the event and the conference, and so we're in an empty cinema, which is why things look a bit strange, and it's a bit difficult for us because it has technical constraints, which means we're almost sat on the floor and my legs only just reach the ground. But that's by the by. We shall get on with it. I'm talking with Andy Kennedy, who is Network Virtualization Engineer with VMware. Andy, welcome. Thanks for talking to us, and thanks for sitting in the front row of the 1 and 6 minutes or whatever it is.
It's my pleasure, and it's a great seat, so thank you.
Okay, let's get straight into it, shall we? What do you think are the biggest challenges for service providers right now? So
today, our service provider customers are being challenged around a couple of key points. The first is that they're under pressure in terms of maintaining and sustaining their margin of the services that they provide, because we see competition from the over-the-top providers and the fact that there is continued pressure on increasing bandwidth, etc., for their subscribers. Now, the other point we note is that today we see the introduction of new services to the mobile platforms, examples being 4G services, 4G rollouts. We see entry into emerging markets, and we need a faster time to innovation for new services to be rolled out for those platforms.
Okay, thank you. What do you think then are the main challenges, and you see this at sort of ground level, the biggest challenges for when it comes to implementing transformational technologies like NFV and SDN?
So I think there are a couple of points around the organizational challenges that exist. For many years we've been operating in a model whereby the vendor that provides the function, shall we say, also provides the physical hardware components that make up that function. And we're moving to a model whereby we see the virtualization of those technologies. And of course that introduces some new operational models, particularly around building cloud platforms and bringing the cloud paradigm to telco. So what we see is a big challenge whereby today we need to build a shared platform or shared infrastructure platform on which we can run virtualized network functions. So we can have support and resource guarantees to be able to run functions across multiple vendors and be able to use that common infrastructure to achieve the economies of scale and also achieve simplicity of operations for those operators.
You mentioned multiple vendors, which is interesting because, of course, we're seeing happening is a huge amount of emphasis on open source, open standards, open networks, etc. And it's changing the whole outlook of the industry in as far as vendors are working together, partnering more than they would ever have done so before. Do you find that's what's happening with VMware as well?
I would agree. So one of the things that VMware announced after a very exciting Mobile World Congress was our vCloud for NFV platform, but with integrated OpenStack. So today we believe that our vCloud for NFV platform will be the fastest and easiest way for an operator to adopt OpenStack technology. However, that said, today there are some gaps, shall we say, between what is possible with an OpenStack-based infrastructure and what can be achieved today with VMware's technology, which has been in production now for several years in many mobile operators' networks to support network functions virtualization. And specifically that's around things like resource guarantees, so that you can be assured that you can have proper isolation and performance across that multiple vendor shared platform.
What about the actual use in practical commercial terms of NFV? NFV sprung from nowhere two and a quarter years ago, whatever it was, and has dominated the agenda over the past 18 months in telco and TSPs and so on. And suddenly it's here, and we've gone through the notion that it's going to happen. We've been through the hype cycle, we've been through proof of concept, we've seen the test labs, etc., etc. How near are we to seeing real, genuine NFV applications and services in a real network for money?
Yep.
And where do you think this is going to take place first? Do you think it's a global phenomenon? Do you think it's going to be in the Americas, north or south? Do you think it's going to be in Europe? Do you think it's going to be in Korea, Japan? Where?
So a couple of points there. So I think the first is that NFV has been in production for several years. In fact, there are some specific references that we can mention. Companies like Vodafone, etc., have deployed this technology and are using it to support network functions virtualization in their operators' networks. The other point to note as well is that as we kind of see the adoption of NFV, it actually can apply not only to the mobile operators, but also to the fixed line operators too. And there are some specific use cases. So if we take the fixed line operators, examples would be things like virtual customer premise equipment. That's really important because if you imagine the cost of having to do truck rolls and deploy new boxes or appliances out to a customer premise is actually very prohibitive in terms of both taking a lot of time, a lot of disruption, but also the fact that it slows down the time to innovation of deployment of new services because, of course, if you want to add a new service, if that box is not capable, it means having to swap the box and change the box. By making something far more simple in terms of a function that sits within a data center to provide that capability, it means that the cost of actually deploying that service is far lower for the operator, but also it's far quicker to deploy, so therefore the customer actually gets the benefit of being able to have access to those functions immediately. But with regards to your question about geography, I guess the Network Functions Virtualization kind of industry specifications group was actually formed by the European Telecommunications Standards Institute.
It was.
But that said, it is a global phenomenon, and I think you'll see operators, and today we've had operators from all around the world speaking to us about our NFVI platform. So I'm pretty sure that it will be a global phenomenon, and I think that what will probably be the catalyst for that will be, I guess, the technology changes we see in various geographies. Examples being the rollout of 4G services. As you know, there are certain geographies where that's far more advanced, and where there are geographies where maybe the 4G technology hasn't quite yet been able to be prevalent as we might hope, then of course NFV might be a way of actually being able to do that at lower cost point for those operators, so making it more attractive for them to deploy.
Earlier on at the beginning of the interview, you mentioned the fact that cultural change, the challenges that are facing service providers and telecoms operators as a result of the introduction of SDN and NFV are enormous. Yeah. It's costly, it's disruptive, it's difficult, it requires organisational change to the psychology of an organisation and to the way it's run in the process, etc. That seems to me to be as much of a encumbrance to it going through than anything else. Do you find that yourself? Is that one of the sort of unwritten or underlying worries that people have about this?
I think it does. I think both the organisational transformation that has to happen to support the adoption and to realise the benefits that NFV can bring is definitely a barrier, shall we say, or an inhibitor to the adoption of this solution. There's also the fact as well, one of the things that VMware is observing, and today we support, I think, more than 40 virtualized network functions running on top of 30 different vendors' products. One of the things we have observed is actually there is still sometimes an old world mentality even for virtualization technologies. And let me give you a specific example. So some of our customers have actually explained to us that today when a virtualized network function vendor, let's say for example somebody that provides a component that sits in a mobile network, comes to that customer and they say, we can virtualize our technology and we can provide you that virtual function. But what they also do is they make you take their infrastructure layer and even their hardware as well. Now the problem is that works for the first operator or the first function, but then what happens when the next vendor comes along with their function? The issue is that they're not prepared to run their component on top of somebody else's platform. So therefore, when it comes to VMware, we believe that by the virtue of the fact that we're there to provide a multi-tenanted or multi-vendor platform, it means that the actual operator itself can take advantage of the economies of scale, but also the efficiencies of having a common platform, and then they can focus on about which applications they wish to run or which functions they would like to run on that platform itself.
Very interesting, because of course a lot of this is predicated, a lot of NFV definitely is predicated on the fact that CSPs, telcos were absolutely sick to the back teeth of vendor lock-in. Yeah. They had no choice but to go to the one they were with without ripping everything out and being charged the earth for the change. And the push has come from the CSPs to make this change, to make the vendors understand that the days of lock-in are over. And we're not going back to that, but it sounds as though in some ways we might be.
And it's true, and indeed, you know, just maybe even to comment on the perspective that VMware does have proprietary technology. But one of the things we have done is part of our vCloud for NFV platform deployment or announcement is also the announcement of our integrated OpenStack offering as well. So what we want to be able to do is we want to make sure that the communications service providers have the ability to deploy their functions and use, for example, open APIs to instantiate those functions, but they can still take advantage of the carrier-grade operations that comes with our vSphere platform and be comfortable in knowing that they have a choice. They have the ability to have access to open APIs to instantiate all that infrastructure. There's no vendor lock-in, but they still have access to the value and the benefit that comes from a vendor such as VMware.
Let's look forward as far as we possibly can in this industry, which isn't very far.
No.
Next Saturday maybe, no, but really. Say we meet again in a year's time, where do you think NFV will be, and where do you think your company, VMware, will be in terms of NFV?
So we're fully committed to improving and I guess supporting our carrier operators and our communication service provider partners to build out the NFVI layer, the Network Functions Virtualization Infrastructure layer. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we will see as we go through 2015 into 2016 is a wider adoption of that technology over and above maybe the market kind of leaders in the space, or shall we say the first movers. And I think one of the things we will see is that as we move into 2015, 2016, eventually we'll see OpenStack mature and be ready to provide the carrier-grade service level agreements that are required to support a multi-vendor platform, but also VMware itself continues to add value and improve its technology to provide the infrastructure layer that sits underneath OpenStack. And I think the key thing there is, I think by the time we get to 2016, I think we will see that model I described about having OpenStack as the consumption model for virtualized network functions running on top of, I hope, our VMware platform.
Andy Kennedy, thanks very much indeed.
My pleasure, thank you.